The Great Gatsby is an adaptation of author F. Scott Fitzgerald's award-winning novel. It revolves around the story of protagonist Nick Carraway, his time on Long Island, and his view of the complicated relationship between his cousin Daisy and neighbor Jay Gatsby. Not to mention the affairs had among characters and the economic disparity present. Taking place in 1920s New York, the movie makes a great effort to immerse the audience in the Roaring Twenties, from the eclectic jazz scene to the energetic parties. The Great Gatsby is, for the most part, an accurate depiction of life and dynamics during the Roaring Twenties and Jazz Age.
The 1920s, affectionately known as the Roaring Twenties, was the period between the First World War and the Great Depression. America saw a transition from wartime economy to peacetime economy, which was reflected in new technology, increased freedom, and increased creativity. Morals became looser during the 20s with the popularity of flapper style. Women wore shorter dresses and heavier makeup, and they drank and smoked more than before. From the beginning, The Great Gatsby establishes fairly accurate historical context for the time period. Nick Carraway, the narrator and protagonist of the movie, launches the audience into the dynamics of New York City and the surrounding area. The Wall Street boom, as he mentions, gives the 20s its reputation for being economically, socially, and culturally prosperous. Other aspects, like the growing party scene, rising buildings, and backfiring of prohibition, were also characteristics of the 20s. Another accuracy in The Great Gatsby is depiction of the Valley of Ashes, which is actually based on the Corona ash dumps that were present in Queens during the 1920s. The Second Industrial Revolution brought an increase in manufacturing to produce goods like automobiles and appliances, which meant the use of coal increased as well. Using more coal meant that more ash was being created, with little space to hold it. Although brief, the movie shows other events of significance happening at the same time in New York City, particularly the Harlem Renaissance. Black jazz musicians made a quick appearance during the scenes in New York. These details accurately show the growing importance of black culture in the arts and music in what was known as the Jazz Age.
Throughout the movie, and especially during the party, the classic flapper image of the 20s is accurately portrayed by many women. Flappers were women who defied traditional women moral behaviors, and often resorted to smoking, drinking, and sexual behavior. Because of the freedom the Jazz Age brought, they found themselves dancing more freely with moves like the cakewalk and Charleston, as seen at the party. Finally, the movie does a good job at depicting the drastic new hairstyles, makeup, and fashion they adopted. Nearly everything was trimmed shorter than traditional styles in order to make movement easier. Hair became shorter with styles like the bob cut or shingle cut. While the party scene did accurately capture these characteristics, a minor inaccuracy was the presence of African Americans joining in the celebrations. As the group was heading into the city, they used their cars as their means of transportation. This aspect is accurate, as cars in the 20s gave people more freedom to go wherever they wanted. However, as they were driving, they had passed by a group of blacks who were being driven by a white driver. Again, any black association with whites is an inaccurate detail due to segregated social structure and was definitely out of place for the time period. Gatsby's butlers approach him with incoming calls from Chicago and Philadelphia. Also, Gatsby's association with the character Meyer Wolfsheim, a prominent figure in organized crime, raises suspicion, and for good reason. The movie accurately depicts the backfiring of prohibition through smuggling and bootlegging. When Prohibition began, people were forced to produce liquor in secret using questionable methods of fermentation. Later in the movie, it was revealed that Gatsby was involved in such illegal activity to acquire his wealth, having sold bootlegged alcohol over the counter. The movie depicted yet another backfiring of Prohibition, which was the rise of secret bars and nightclubs, or speakeasies, to sell alcohol illegally. While the presence of these establishments were accurate, the movie's depiction was inaccurate in that the speakeasy shown was not segregated.
In the background of these clips of Nick and Gatsby, you can see multiple African American people that are sitting next to white people, which is inaccurate for the time period because even speakeasies were segregated.
In essence, The Great Gatsby does a good job at setting the historical scene, summing up the aspects that define this time period, from the effects of Prohibition to economic conditions to the revolution in culture. Other than a few flaws in terms of black and white interactions, the dynamic decade comes to life throughout the movie.